The customer profile provides key details for each account within the BOSS system. This includes 5 main areas that we're going to review in this presentation. First, in the upper left corner, you'll notice the account number. The account number must be a unique value for each customer account. It has a maximum length of 10 characters, consisting of either or characters and or numbers. Beside that field is the account manager. This would be listed as the default account manager whenever a quote is created for this account. Based on the user security, that is changeable at a later time. Date established is an optional field that you can indicate when you establish a relationship with the account. It may have been by phone or the date that it was actually added to the BOSS system. Other information in the upper left section is some general information about the company, the name, and some contact information. The 2 additional fields of interest are both the language and the default branch. The language, when set, indicates the preferred language that the customer would like to receive documentation in. Documentation would be standard docs such as quotes, sales orders, packing slips, and invoices. If, for example, the language is set to French, then when those documents are automatically produced, those will be produced based on the customer's default language in this setting. The default branch indicates that, as an option, whenever you create a quote or an order for this customer, that would be the branch that it would be assigned to. Normally, when blank, the default branch is assigned based on the account manager initially creating the quote. The second section of importance in the upper right corner is default quote settings. This section has a number of settings that are mainly related to what will be set when you initially create a quote for this account. First, PST both number and expiration date. If a customer has a PST number, entering it here will automatically transpose it onto any new quotes created for this account. The same with the recycling exemption number. Below that, the quote format, invoice format, and email invoices are all options indicating how the customer may desire their quote formats, their invoice formats, and if they want their invoices emailed to them when produced. First, with the quote and invoice format, when blank, all quotes and invoices will use the standard default quotes and invoices used by organization. If by chance you've created a specialized quote or a specialized invoice for this account, then using the drop-down, you can select and define what that format will be. Again, if left blank, the default quote and invoice will be used normally. The email invoice option, when selected, means that every quote from that point forward that's created and turned into an order will produce an email when the invoice is actually processed. So instead of producing a hard copy of an invoice, which is normally done, in this case, the quote and order, when processed, will actually email that invoice to this account. Default margin and min margin. Additional information when we're looking at product prices. What's our default margin? I think the standard is 10%. If you want that higher or lower, you can indicate that here. And a min margin indicates what the minimum margin should be for overall quotes for this account. The checkboxes below are additionally set whenever you create a quote. If the customer is GST and or HST exempt, setting that value will make their quote and orders exempt from GST and HST. PO required. If your customer indicates that they will only pay their invoices when a PO is actually on the invoice, then setting that value will mean that any quote being processed to an order will first check to ensure that a PO exists on that quotation. If it doesn't exist and that check mark has been set, then it will not allow the quote to be processed to an order until a PO has been assigned to that quote. Again, when turning that on here, that automatically applies to the quote in question. Below, don't print $0 invoices. More commonly used for service, where often we'll see warranty calls with zero bill to the customer. But overall, any invoice that's produced that has a zero total wouldn't be printed if that option was turned on. Direct to customer. If product that is being ordered is often being shipped directly to the customer, certainly a common occurrence these days, then indicating that check value means that whenever processing those orders onto a PO, Instead of the product being shipped to the location, it will be generally shipped directly to the customer. Invoice complete indicates that the customer is happy to receive partial shipments, but doesn't want to receive partial invoices. If you have an invoice of 10 items and 5 arrive on Monday and get shipped out, normally we would generate an invoice immediately for those 5 items. When this flag is turned on, we would wait until the additional 5 items have all been shipped, and until all 10 items are ready to go, only then would an invoice be completed. Again, the system would handle that automatically. Finally, leasing company. If this account was actually a leasing company, IBM Leasing, HP Leasing, etc., then indicating that check mark would tell us that this is a leasing company and not a normal customer that you deal with every day. Below that section, under report settings, are a number of options that you can set to enhance, improve, and design reports based on the different customers you have. Firstly, the customer type 1 and 2. These are drop-down values that you can define and indicate how your customer might fit into one or both of these options. In the example here, we're indicating this is a finance type of company and the size is small. In our example, 10 to 99. You may indicate other things such as government, federal, education, post-secondary. Whatever options you decide to track, you can indicate with the customized list for both customer type 1 and customer type 2. Below, you have an additional 5 user-defined fields. Up to 5 of them can be defined in any way that you wish. The labels, user field 1, user field 2, etc., can be changed via the admin module. Please see that video for additional settings on how to set the user fields labels for either of these options. Also note that the field types are slightly different. Field types 1 and 2 are both open-ended fields. You can type almost anything you want in there. Whereas field list 3 is a drop-down, user field 4 is a pop-up, as well as user field 5 is also a pop-up. This just controls what type of information can be put into these fields. Again, the values that can be used here are assigned via the admin module. Finally, for report settings, we have an account reference. This is a field that's used to link 2 or more customers together. Again, using the example of, let's say, a large organization with multiple offices, if each office happened to have its own account in the system, then you could tie them together by using the account reference. Acme Inc., federal building, school building, anything that's common that has the same account reference ties those customers together and can be used in a reporting fashion. So you could say, list all customers with this account reference. All of these values in this reporting settings have absolutely no effect on the process of quote, ordering, and all the way to invoicing. They simply are there to provide reporting mechanisms using the newer reports.net module. Also remember that with historic information in your system today potentially, setting a value in any one of these 8 fields will instantly allow you to track that information going back as far back as you want as far as generating reports based on values that are in here. It's not the case of setting a value today and only being able to report on what occurs afterwards. Any values here do allow you to look back on any previous orders and report on that if desired. Over to the left, we've got a number of account settings. These include credit limit, or primarily the credit limit. In this case, the customer has a credit limit of $10,000. Any order that's over $10,000 would be flagged and require approval by appropriate people in the organization. If you didn't want to track credit limits, for either because it was the federal government or for whatever reason, setting the credit limit to 0 skips any checks for credit limit. Again, setting the credit limit to 0 indicates do not check any credit limits. What some locations have done, if they want some strict restrictions on account, they'll set that maybe to a penny or $1. By setting it to such a low value, you're indicating that all quotes turned into an order should be validated before being approved and ordered through the system. To improve the credit limit, we also check 2 additional values. Open orders. So let's say, for example, this account had $2,000 currently in the to be shipped queue. that would indicate that of the 10,000, they've currently used up 2,000, so a credit check would only allow an order below $8,000 to go through. Unpaid invoices, depending if your unpaid invoices are either being derived from within BOSS or from your external accounting system, this as well would be a factor on the credit limit. Again, if open orders was 2,000 and unpaid invoices was an additional 3,000, that of course would leave a credit limit at that time of $5,000. The first three fields, of course, when added, would reflect the available credit to this account over on the right-hand side. Additional fields in accounting include their terms, what their default terms are, the average days, which as you can see is the average days to pay an invoice, and when was the last invoice that they actually were issued. In this example, October 2nd, 2012, for an amount shown there. Finally, additional account settings. Customer on hold. If ever you wish to put a customer on hold, maybe for credit reasons, validation, whatever, setting that on would basically mean not allowing any quote to be turned into an order as long as that customer is on hold. If a customer becomes inactive, maybe they're out of business or for whatever other reason, you can indicate this as well. By setting them to inactive or customer active false, you're not allowed to create any quotes against that account. When you create a new customer in the system, the new CUS flag will automatically be set. Again, this would allow you to create a quote for this customer, but any quotes attempted to turn into an order would be flagged for approval until someone, typically the accounting department, would indicate that this customer has been checked and validated, and thus the new customer flag would then be removed. And finally, check approval. If by rare occurrences this is turned off, it simply indicates that there is no accounting checks done whatsoever. The only example we've seen on occasion might be federal government or other indication areas of interest, but overall this value should normally be checked on. The bottom section, first and foremost, indicates our customer address. This is the default address that would be used whenever we create an initial quote. The billing and the shipping would copy directly into that quote using the values coming out of here. In some cases, you may leave one or both of these blank, and that might be because the number of different addresses for that account are quite vast, and thus there is no standard starting address, for example. But in most cases, there should be a common default address for both the billing and the shipping information. Of course, you can change that at any time when you do create a quote, either manually overwriting it or using the built-in search address options that exist for quotes and orders. Order notes. If for some occasions you wanted to put some specialized notes for this customer on common documents such as packing slips or invoices, you could indicate that here, and they would appear generally on those documents when they're produced later in the process. If you wanted to indicate a default freight value for this account, i.e. every time we create a quote, we want to have a default freight of $10. You'll notice in the bottom area that we've got a number of freight options, cost plus $sign. So overall cost of the order plus X dollars would be how freight would be calculated in one option. In another, cost plus percent. Commonly or more commonly, fixed freight, so indicating this example amount of $10, so any quote that's created will default to a fixed $10 freight. And finally, fixed line, and that's a specialized freight that's calculated at the line level and must be configured using the item master of each individual line throughout the quote that's on the current order. Other fields here are more for general information, what their default courier might be, their preferred service, if they have an account number, and any terms that they may utilize as far as freight is concerned. Bundles provide customized price lists for the account. If an account has some standards, for example, with printers, they may decide that they're only allowed to purchase HP printers and only specific printers. Well, instead of always looking through the hundreds of thousands of product that are currently available, we can use the bundles to quickly narrow down some common items. In this example, we've added 2 printers to their bundles under the list for printers, both HP printers. As a second example, we've listed 4 items of common laptops that this customer might normally order. Again, when you create a quote for this account, the bundle prices are available as a quick lookup for some of the common items that they normally would order. We have additional customer notes that can be certainly updated at any given time. Invoice information, notice there's an additional note there that's more geared towards AR or the accounting side of notes. Service information, again, additional notes for that. We have a related docs, which allow us to do two things. One, link a document to this account. Could be a profile, could be an RFP, could be just about any document necessary that you might want to link to this account profile. We also can link a URL. Might be their URL or their main website, for example, or maybe it's HP or IBM or something specific to some of the products that they normally order. Any of that can be tied and shown here, allowing the user to look back at that at any final time. Last but not least, there is a leasing option here. If this account will be leasing orders from a leasing company, we must indicate those leasing companies in the list on the right-hand side. Simply pressing New will list for us all the current valid leasing companies, IBM Leasing, HP Leasing, etc. And when we select them, and it can be more than one if desired, we're simply indicating that these are valid leasing companies that this account will normally order from or use as far as leasing orders concerned. If left blank, if a sales rep attempts to put leasing linked to a current quote, it will not allow it to occur without validation of one or more leasing companies in this list. Finally, any changes should be saved, and